Antony Loewenstein, he's the author of the Palestine Laboratory. That's a book on Israel's arms and surveillance industry. He joins us live from Sydney in Australia. Anthony, always good to have you with us. Sadly, yet more Al Jazeera journalists been targeted, killed by Israel in Gaza. But adding some context here, Anthony, this is also about Israel wanting to control the narrative and silence the voices, as Hamda was saying there. Anas al-Sharif had exposed the killings, the atrocities, the starvation and the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
Absolutely. And controlling the narrative has always been central to what Israel's trying to do. I mean, I would argue it's actually increasingly not working. And I say that because public opinion polls in pretty much every Western country, much of Europe, the UK, Australia, US, finds that a majority of citizens fundamentally oppose what Israel is doing in Gaza. And in fact, particularly 18 to 35-year-olds fundamentally disagree and loathe Israel for this kind of behavior. Now, obviously, that's not often reflected in the political decisions made by our leaders, but there is a profound disconnect between what Israel is trying to do in Gaza, essentially mass starvation, mass killing, and frankly, ethnic cleansing and genocide, and what people are seeing day in, day out on their phones, on their computers, and what they're seeing and hearing. And ultimately, controlling the narrative, Israel is spending this year alone $150 million US more to try to do that, to bring influencers to Israel, to try to shift people's views about what Israel is doing. I don't think it's going to work, frankly, but they're trying.
Yeah, Anthony, you were telling us earlier that when the Gaza war started, Israel had set up a so-called legitimacy cell to justify their killings in Gaza and to tie Gaza journalists to Hamas. But 22 months later, I mean, Israel still has provided no evidence whatsoever, but constantly, as you say, repeats this propaganda and the lies about links to Hamas.
And one of the things that this legitimacy cell, so-called, was about was partly trying to find justification for what Israel was doing in Gaza in general, particularly trying to tie journalists in Gaza to Hamas. And they realise there's no evidence, but yet they still smear them nonetheless. But the question, therefore, is why are virtually every Western media outlet, even in the last few hours after the announcement of this murder of these journalists, still repeating, including in the BBC and others, IDF talking points right at the top of the story? We are at the point now, 22 months into this genocide, that IDF talking points cannot and should be not published as somehow fact. There's two sides. Palestinians say this. The Israelis say this in response. No, we are long past that. I noticed in the last few hours a key journalist in Israel, in fact, put out a statement essentially saying that what journalists in Israel and beyond need to do is not anymore publish IDF statements at all, full stop, until they allow independent, safe access into Gaza. And I rest assured if journalists did that, Israel would open up Gaza quickly, because without their narrative, they are lost. And Israel knows that, and journalists need to use that. Like, where is the fact that 22 months in, we are still not seeing the kind of solidarity with Palestinian journalists that we are seeing in other contexts? For example, Ukrainian journalists who deserve respect and support, no question about it, or other kind of conflicts. But when it comes to Palestine and Palestinians, they are somehow inherently suspect because they're what? Palestinian, Arab, mostly Muslim. What is it? It's racism in much of the Western press, outrageously.
Anthony, we hear repeatedly from Israel that Hamas has been defeated, yet whenever Israel murders Palestinian journalists, we hear they're Hamas. Whenever aid trucks are looted, we hear it's Hamas. And Israel blames the ongoing starvation in Gaza on Hamas. But of course, this is the same Hamas that has been eliminated, according to Israel. So how can Israel continue to peddle this narrative? It's nonsense.
Well, it's only peddled if people believe it or repeat it. And as you rightly say, we've been told now for more than a year by many Israeli Prime Minister down that Hamas barely exists anymore, that it's been defeated. And yet, as you rightly say, we're constantly told, including, I might add, by the pro-Israel lobby, sadly, shamefully, as someone who's Jewish, many people in the Jewish community, that somehow Hamas is all-knowing and all-doing. It's complete nonsense. Hamas has been bloodied. Clearly, they've lost many fighters in the last 22 months. Of course they have. But they're still standing, and in fact, they're recruiting because, unsurprisingly, many Palestinians don't like being murdered and their families killed in front of them. So Hamas is recruiting. Hamas will be, whether people like it or not, some presence within Gaza in years to come. What that looks like is not up to me. It's up to Palestinians to decide, and no one else. But ultimately, yes, Hamas clearly is not this all-seeing eye that the West and Israel claims it to be. It's nonsense.
Just a final thought to you, Anthony. We saw that emergency meeting of the UN Security Council yesterday that levelled extensive criticism at Israel's plans to take over Gaza City. The problem here, though, is that a lack of international action and consequences just enables Israel to continue the genocide in Gaza and kill yet more Palestinian journalists. Why is the world sitting back and just watching this and just letting it happen?
It's the Palestine exception, meaning that if this was being done by any other country, Russia, Ethiopia, Sudan, we rightly condemn them for their actions. In some cases, I just mentioned arguably genocide in Ethiopia and Sudan. But somehow when it comes to Israel, there's an exception. And I think what that does is not just make huge amounts of people in the global community outraged, it shows contempt for their institutions because their politicians and frankly many in the media are not actually hearing them. I'm in Sydney, in Australia. Last week, there was around 300,000 Australians who were protesting against this. That is, there's only 27 million Australians in the country. That's a huge number of people. And yet our government and many Western governments do only talk. There is no action. Where's an arms embargo? Where are sanctions? Recognising Palestine, as many Western states now want to do, is not the answer here. It is lip service. Without impunity ending, this situation is not going to end anytime soon.
Antony Loewenstein, always good to get your thoughts and your analysis, Anthony. Many thanks for your time. Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.